Racist manager fired a black janitor, but didn't know he owned the building. The marble floors of Pinnacle Corporate Tower gleamed under the fluorescent lights at 6 in the morning. 23 stories of glass and steel, housing some of the most successful businesses in downtown Atlanta. It was the kind of building that screamed success, power, and prestige. But on the third floor, in a cramped supply closet that smelled of bleach and floor wax, a man in a worn janitor's uniform was checking his watch. His name was Marcus Williams, and everyone in that building saw him as invisible. Just another face in the crowd of maintenance workers who kept their perfect world spotless. What they didn't know was that Marcus Williams wasn't just the janitor. He was something far more powerful than any of them could imagine. And today, their ignorance was about to cost them everything. But what happened next would shock everyone in that building to their core. Marcus Williams had been cleaning floors since he was 16 years old. Growing up in East Atlanta, he learned early that honest work was the only way out of poverty. While other kids his age were hanging out on street corners, Marcus was pushing a mop through office buildings, saving every penny he could. He wasn't just cleaning, though. He was watching. Learning. Listening to conversations about real estate deals, business acquisitions, and investment opportunities that floated through the halls like whispered secrets. By the time he was 30, Marcus had saved enough money to buy his first small apartment building. Nothing fancy, just a rundown property in a neighborhood everyone else had written off. But Marcus saw potential where others saw problems. 20 years later, that one building had become 12. Then 25. Then 50. Marcus Williams had built a real estate empire worth over $40 million. But he never forgot where he came from. He still showed up to work every morning at 6 a.m., mopping floors and emptying trash cans, because he believed in the value of honest work. Nobody at Pinnacle Corporate Tower knew this. To them, he was just Marcus the janitor. The quiet black man who cleaned their offices and fixed their problems without complaint. But everything changed when Bradley Richardson became the new building manager. Bradley Richardson was everything Marcus wasn't. 28 years old, fresh out of business school, and convinced that his MBA made him superior to everyone around him. He wore expensive suits, drove a BMW his father had bought him, and looked at the world through the lens of privilege he'd never earned. From his first day on the job, Richardson made it clear he intended to clean house and run a tighter ship. He strutted around the building with a clipboard, making notes and shaking his head disapprovingly at everything he saw. The first time Richardson saw Marcus, he was emptying trash cans on the executive floor. "Excuse me," Richardson called out, his voice sharp and demanding. "You there?" Marcus looked up from his work. "Yes, sir. How can I help you?" Richardson looked him up and down with obvious disdain. "How long have you worked here?" "About 15 years, sir." 15 years? Richardson scoffed. "And you're still just a janitor? I guess some people are content with mediocrity." Marcus felt the familiar sting of disrespect, but he kept his voice calm. "I take pride in my work, sir. Always have." Richardson smirked. "Pride in mopping floors. How inspiring." He made a note on his clipboard. "What's your name?" "Marcus Williams." "Well, Marcus Williams, let me be clear about something. I'm the new manager here, and I have very high standards. I expect this building to be spotless, and I expect workers to show proper respect to their superiors. Do we understand each other?" Marcus nodded. "Yes, sir." As Richardson walked away, Marcus went back to his work. But something had changed. He could feel it in the air. This young man was going to be trouble. Over the next few weeks, Richardson made Marcus's life miserable. He followed him around the building, criticizing everything he did. He complained that the floors weren't shiny enough, that the trash cans weren't emptied fast enough, that Marcus was taking too long for his lunch breaks. "I don't know what the previous manager was thinking, keeping you around," Richardson said one Tuesday morning. You're slow, you're sloppy, and frankly, I don't think you understand the caliber of businesses we have in this building. Marcus continued mopping, his jaw tight with restrained anger. I've been doing this job for 15 years without a single complaint. Well, now you have complaints, Richardson snapped. Lots of them. But Richardson's harassment went beyond just work criticism. He made comments that cut deeper, revealing the ugly prejudice beneath his expensive suit. You know, Marcus, maybe if your people spent more time working and less time making excuses, you wouldn't still be pushing a mop at your age. Marcus stopped working and looked up. My people? Richardson's face flushed slightly, realizing he'd said too much. But instead of backing down, he doubled down. Don't get sensitive on me. You know what I mean. I'm just saying, personal responsibility matters. Maybe if you'd applied yourself more, you'd have a real job by now. Marcus felt his hands clench around the mop handle. In that moment, he could have told this arrogant young man exactly who he was. He could have pulled out his phone and shown him the bank statements, the property deeds, the investment portfolios that proved he was worth more than Richardson could ever dream of being. But Marcus had learned patience. He had learned to pick his battles. You're right, Marcus said quietly. Personal responsibility does matter. Richardson smiled, satisfied that he'd put the janitor in his place. What he didn't realize was that Marcus was already planning something that would teach him about responsibility in ways he never expected. The harassment escalated over the following month. Richardson began writing Marcus up for infractions that didn't exist. He docked his pay for imaginary tardiness. He made him redo work that was already perfect, claiming it wasn't up to standard. The other employees began to notice. Some looked away uncomfortably when Richardson berated Marcus in public. Others whispered among themselves about the new manager's obvious prejudice. But nobody said anything. They all needed their jobs too much to risk confronting management. Marcus endured it all with quiet dignity. But he was also making phone calls. Checking documents. Reviewing contracts that he hadn't looked at in years. Because Marcus Williams owned more than just apartment buildings. 3 years ago, when Pinnacle Corporate Tower had gone into foreclosure, Marcus had quietly purchased it through one of his shell companies. The building that Richardson managed, the offices where all these businesses operated, the marble floors that Marcus mopped every morning, it all belonged to him. The property management company that handled the day-to-day operations reported to Marcus, but he'd chosen to remain anonymous. He preferred it that way. It allowed him to see how people really behaved when they thought nobody important was watching. Now, for the first time, Marcus was considering revealing his identity. But not yet. First, he wanted to see just how far Richardson would go. He didn't have to wait long. It was a Friday morning in December when Richardson finally crossed the line that couldn't be uncrossed. Marcus was cleaning the lobby windows when a group of potential tenants walked in for a tour. They were well-dressed professionals looking to lease office space on the upper floors. Richardson was giving them the sales pitch, pointing out the building's amenities and talking up the prestigious location. As you can see, Richardson was saying, we maintain very high standards here. Only the most professional businesses and individuals. That's when one of the potential tenants noticed Marcus working nearby. It's nice to see such attention to detail in maintenance, the woman said pleasantly. A clean building says a lot about management. Richardson followed her gaze to Marcus and his expression soured. Oh, that's just our janitor. Don't mind him. The woman smiled at Marcus. Good morning. Thank you for keeping everything so spotless. Marcus nodded politely. Thank you, ma'am. Just doing my job. But Richardson couldn't let it go. Something about seeing Marcus receive even that small acknowledgement triggered his worst instincts. Actually, Richardson said loudly, I've been meaning to address some issues with our cleaning staff. Some people just don't understand what it means to work in a professional environment. The potential tenants looked uncomfortable. Marcus continued cleaning, pretending not to hear, but his shoulders tensed. You know how it is with some of these people, Richardson continued, his voice carrying across the lobby. They show up expecting a paycheck but don't want to do the work. No work ethic, no sense of responsibility. Now the potential tenants were actively uncomfortable. One of the men cleared his throat. Perhaps we should continue the tour upstairs. But Richardson was on a roll now, emboldened by what he mistook for agreement. Exactly my point. This is why we're selective about who we allow in the building. We want tenants who understand quality, who appreciate professional standards. Not like some people who are content to stay in their place and collect a welfare check. Marcus stopped cleaning. The lobby fell silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. "Excuse me?" Marcus said, turning around slowly. Richardson's face was flushed with the confidence of a man who thought he held all the power. "You heard me, Williams. Maybe it's time you found work more suited to your skill level." The potential tenants exchanged horrified glances. One of them actually took a step back. "I think we've seen enough," the woman said quickly. "We'll be in touch." They left so fast they were almost running. Richardson watched them go with confusion, not understanding that his behavior had just cost him a major lease deal. But Marcus understood. He understood everything now. "Mr. Richardson," Marcus said calmly, "I need to speak with you privately." Richardson sneered. "What about, Williams? You want to file a complaint? Good luck with that. I'm the manager here." Marcus reached into his back pocket and pulled out his phone. He scrolled through his contacts until he found the number he was looking for. "Jennifer, this is Marcus Williams." "Yes, that Marcus Williams. I need you to come to the building immediately. Bring the ownership documents and the management contracts." He paused, listening. "No, I'm ready to make the change we discussed. It's time." Richardson watched this conversation with growing confusion. "Who are you calling? What change?" Marcus ended the call and looked at Richardson with eyes that had suddenly transformed from submissive to commanding. "The change where you're fired, Mr. Richardson." Richardson laughed. "You can't fire me, you idiot. You're a janitor. I'm the building manager. I could fire you with one phone call." "Go ahead," Marcus said quietly. "Make the call." Something in Marcus's tone made Richardson hesitate. For the first time, he looked uncertain. 20 minutes later, Jennifer Patterson walked into the lobby. She was a sharp-dressed attorney carrying a briefcase and moving with the confidence of someone who handled million-dollar deals before breakfast. "Mr. Williams," she said with a professional smile. "I have the documents you requested." Richardson looked back and forth between them, confusion growing. "What documents? What's going on here?" Jennifer opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. "Mr. Richardson, I presume. I'm Jennifer Patterson, attorney for Pinnacle Holdings LLC. I have some information that might interest you." She handed him a document. Richardson scanned it, his eyes growing wider with each line. "This is the ownership deed for this building," Jennifer explained. "As you can see, Pinnacle Corporate Tower is owned entirely by Pinnacle Holdings LLC." Richardson's face went pale. "I don't understand. I was told the building was owned by a corporation in New York." "It is," Jennifer said. "Pinnacle Holdings LLC is incorporated in New York. But it's a wholly owned subsidiary of Williams Real Estate Enterprises." She handed him another document. "And Williams Real Estate Enterprises," she continued, "is owned entirely by Mr. Marcus Williams." Richardson's legs nearly gave out. He stared at the documents, then at Marcus, then back at the documents. "This is impossible," he whispered. Marcus stepped forward, no longer the submissive janitor Richardson had been tormenting. Now he stood with the quiet authority of a man who owned 47 buildings across 3 states. "Mr. Richardson," Marcus said calmly, "for the past 3 months, you have verbally abused me, discriminated against me, and created a hostile work environment. You've made assumptions about my character, my work ethic, and my worth as a human being based solely on the color of my skin and the job I choose to do. Richardson opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. You've also just cost this building a major lease deal with your unprofessional behavior in front of potential tenants. Behavior that was not only morally reprehensible but financially damaging to my property. Marcus paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. But more importantly, you've shown me exactly the kind of person you are. And that kind of person has no place managing my building. Jennifer pulled out another document. Mr. Richardson, this is your termination notice, effective immediately. You have 1 hour to clear out your office and surrender all building keys and access cards. Richardson finally found his voice. You can't do this. I'll sue. This is wrongful termination. Based on what? Jennifer asked coolly. We have witnesses to your discriminatory behavior. We have documentation of your harassment. And we have security footage of your conduct with potential tenants that directly resulted in lost revenue. She handed him a final paper. This is a settlement agreement. If you sign it, you'll receive 2 weeks severance pay and a neutral reference. If you don't sign it, we'll contest your unemployment claim and you'll leave with nothing but a very negative reference that will follow you to every job interview for the rest of your career. Richardson stared at the papers in his shaking hands. His expensive suit suddenly looked cheap. His confidence had evaporated like morning mist. I didn't know, he stammered. Marcus looked at him with something that might have been pity. Mr. Richardson, that's exactly the problem. You didn't know. You never bothered to know. You made assumptions about me based on what you could see, and you treated me accordingly. Marcus pulled out his own phone and showed Richardson the screen. It displayed a bank account balance with 8 figures. You assumed that because I clean floors for a living, I must be poor, uneducated, and inferior to you. You assumed that because I'm a black man in a janitor's uniform, I must be lazy, irresponsible, and unworthy of respect. He put the phone away. But assumptions, Mr. Richardson, can be very dangerous things. Especially when they're based on prejudice instead of facts. Richardson signed the termination papers with a trembling hand. As he walked toward the elevator to clear out his office, Marcus called after him. Mr. Richardson. The young man turned around, his face a mask of humiliation and defeat. The next time you meet someone, Marcus said quietly, try getting to know them before you decide who they are. You might be surprised by what you learn. As the elevator doors closed on Richardson's stunned face, Marcus turned to Jennifer. Promote Sandra Martinez to building manager, he said. She's been working in the office for 5 years, knows the tenants, and has never treated anyone with anything but respect. Jennifer made a note. And the janitor position? Marcus smiled and picked up his mop. I'll keep handling that myself. It keeps me grounded. Word of what happened spread through the building like wildfire. By the end of the day, every tenant knew that the quiet janitor they'd barely noticed was actually their landlord. The same man they'd passed in the hallways without acknowledgement owned the very ground they walked on. Some were embarrassed by how they'd ignored him. Others were amazed by his humility. But everyone learned something that day about the danger of judging people by appearances. Marcus continued working as the building's janitor for another year. But now, when he mopped the floors or emptied the trash cans, people stopped to talk with him. They asked about his story, his journey, his wisdom about business and life. The young executives who had once looked through him now sought his advice. The successful lawyers and accountants who had considered him invisible now invited him to lunch. The building that had once been divided by invisible class lines became a community. And Marcus Williams, millionaire real estate mogul and janitor, proved something that the world desperately needed to learn. Success isn't measured by the clothes you wear or the title on your business card. It's measured by how you treat other people, especially those you think have less power than you do. Respect isn't something you earn based on your bank account or your college degree. It's something you give freely to every human being, regardless of their station in life. And assumptions? Well, assumptions can cost you everything, especially when they're rooted in prejudice and ignorance. Bradley Richardson learned that lesson the hard way. He never worked in property management again. The last anyone heard, he was working in his father's insurance office, hopefully a little wiser and a lot more humble than he'd been before. Marcus Williams? He's still out there, still building his empire, still mopping floors when the mood strikes him. Because he understands something that took Bradley Richardson too long to learn. The value of a person has nothing to do with the work they do. It has everything to do with the character they show while doing it. Remember that the next time you're tempted to judge someone by their uniform, their job title, or the color of their skin. You never know who you're really talking to. And you definitely never know who might be signing your paycheck.